clashes between forces loyal to President Kiir and forces loyal to the armed opposition in the recent civil war on Friday, in which almost 300 people died, and I could hear the gunshots and the artillery fire very clearly from where I am now for a solid period of about an hour that evening. Today there has been a resumption of fighting after a day's relative calm yesterday, but the concentration of the fighting has been just outside Juba, in a part of town called Jebel, and another part called Gudele, and part of northern Juba, near a UN base in town and not far from the airport.
You mentioned the UN base. Reportedly, both of their compounds, the UMIS compounds, have taken fire. Do you know, is that collateral or are they being targeted in any way?
It's hard to say whether they've been targeted, but it's also impossible to rule it out. From reports I'm getting within the camps, there have been shots fired into the camps, and yes, damage has been done. I understand that there are also casualties, although there are no numbers confirmed. But both the UN bases are also home to refugees. So one of them, before recent days, was hosting 28,000 internally displaced people, and many of those have felt so threatened by the fighting that they've started climbing in or gaining access to the UN base right next door to them. That's the one that's outside the city, and the UN has been letting them do that. They've reported that there are about 1,000 people who've done that. And then the UN base in town was formerly a place for the protection of civilians, as they call it, and it's where many people ran in December 2013 under attacks by forces loyal to the government. They'd actually been moved away from that camp to the one outside Juba, but many hundreds are now returning. The UN reported that 700 people have fled to that camp. But as you say, both of those areas are still sustaining fire, so it's hard to know quite how safe those people in those camps are.
Yeah, a lot of concern for the IDPs, the internally displaced in those camps. I mean, give people a little bit of context here. I mean, how huge is the distrust between the president and vice president? What sparked this? How did we get to here?
Well, I mean, there's been distrust between the two tribes that these two men represent. The President Salva Kiir is leader of the Dinka tribe, the largest tribe in the country, and his first vice president, Riek Machar, is the leader of the Nuer tribe, which is the second largest tribe in the country. And there's been a lot of history between those two tribes for decades. It's obviously erupted again back in 2013, when these two men they'd been president and vice president of the new country of South Sudan since July 2011. But in the latter half of 2013, there were increasing political rivalries between the two and increasing suspicions between the two. And Riek Machar, the vice president, was actually ousted from the government. There was a succession of events later in that year, then was turned into fighting through a skirmish among some soldiers, and that quickly escalated. And because you had these two enormous tribal factions behind the leaders, there were people there ready to fight, and that very quickly caught fire and became a civil war in which tens of thousands of people died. So all of those resentments have built up. There's been revenge attacks and that have escalated in a cyclical fashion, and the concern is that is exactly what's happening again now.